73 officers have lost their lives in the line of duty so far this year, 4 in just this past week, each from a different cause, but nearly half, or 34, were a result of gunfire, with the month of July being the deadliest with 14. If we were to remove the duty-related illnesses, 9/11 related illnesses, and the Fauci-ouchie from both this year and last year, we averaged one line of duty death every 2.5 days last year and one every 3.5 days so far this year. So although it seems like there's a lot this year, we're actually doing much better. So let's start with the lives lost this past week, and then we'll move on to the officers injured by gunfire in this past week. Starting with Deputy Sheriff Timothy Geyer of the Johnson County Sheriff's Office in Indiana, end of watch Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Deputy Sheriff Tim Geyer suffered a heart attack after completing mandatory physical training at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. Deputy Geyer returned to the dormitory room to clean up after physical training. At 7:30 a.m., he was found unresponsive in his room when he did not report for breakfast. Despite life-saving measures, he was unable to be revived. Deputy Geyer had served with the Johnson County Sheriff's Office for 8 months. He is survived by his wife and 4 children. He was 49 years old. Police Officer Matthew Hare of the Easley Police Department in South Carolina, end of watch Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Police Officer Matthew Hare was struck and killed by an Amtrak train near the 2000 block of East Main Street while attempting to pull a, can't say that word, subject from the railroad tracks. The subject had called 911 at about 5 a.m. while suffering a mental crisis after Hare and another officer located the subject on the tracks at about 6 a.m. as the oncoming train approached. The officers were removing the subject from the tracks when Officer Hare was fatally struck. Neither the other officer nor the subject was injured. Officer Hare had graduated from the police academy only 5 months earlier. He's survived by his mother, brother, aunt, grandparents, cousin, and stepsister. He was 22 years old. Police Officer Jonah Oswald of the Fairway Police Department, Kansas. End of watch Monday, August 7th, 2023. Police Officer Jonah Oswald succumbed to a gunshot wounds he received when he attempted to arrest 2 subjects who fled from officers in a stolen vehicle. At 7:30 a.m., Lenexa police responded to reports of a stolen vehicle in Mission. As he attempted to apprehend the subjects, the male and female fled, hitting one of the Lenexa police vehicles. Officers from neighboring agencies, including the Fairway Police Department, assisted in the pursuit until the subjects crashed their vehicle and ran into the Quick Trip in Mission. Officer Oswald and another officer entered the store, and when officers attempted to arrest the subjects, gunfire broke out. Officer Oswald was critically injured and transported to the hospital, where he succumbed to his wounds the next day. The male subject was shot and killed. The female subject in custody and charged with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. Officer Oswald was a United States Army Reserve veteran and had served at the Fairway Police Department for 4 years. He is survived by his wife and 2 children. Officer Bill Sapolu from the Honolulu Police Department in Hawaii. End of watch Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. Officer Bill Sapolu succumbed to his injuries sustained in a motorcycle crash on July 11th of 2023. He was responding to back up another officer on a weapons violation call at about 9 p.m. when his motorcycle struck a concrete median. He was thrown from the motorcycle and sustained serious injuries. He remained in critical condition until his organs could be donated. Officer Sapolu was a U.S. Army National Guard veteran and had served with the Honolulu Police Department for 21 years. He is survived by his wife and children. Okay, now we're going to go on to the officers that were injured this past week. We're going to start in Austin, Texas, where we have an adult male officer that was injured and an adult male suspect who was unharmed and arrested. Shortly before 9 p.m., officers responded to a welfare check call at a residence in the 10,000 block of Channel Island Drive. At a news conference, a concerned 911 caller had told police a man had not been seen in several months. Officers knocked on the door, but no one answered. After identifying themselves, officers announced that they were going to force their way into the house, at which point the man confronted police with a gun at his door. Police retreated, and the man walked out of his front door and began shooting. They did not specify whether the man shot at the police or in any particular direction, but the police returned fire. Just after 9 p.m., one of the two responding officers said he had been shot. As more officers arrived, including SWAT team and troopers from Texas Department of Public Safety, the man retreated into his residence. The wounded officer was treated for injuries that were non-life-threatening and taken to the hospital, where he was in stable condition. The man ended the standoff by surrendering around midnight and was taken into custody. Officers noticed he had been injured and took him to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The situation appears to be an isolated incident. The police don't believe there's any threat to the public. Both of the original responding officers fired their guns and will be placed on administrative leave. So this guy, somebody does a welfare check on this guy, and the cops show up, and he ends up firing at the police. And this just shows how dangerous it is for police every time they go on a call. But had nobody ever called that welfare check in, these cops would have never showed up at his door, and none of this would have ever happened. So you have to wonder if some of this stuff, I don't know, I don't want to go too far, in the weeds on this, but, did somebody call that was legitimately concerned about this guy, or was it somebody calling because of other reasons? But we'll leave it at that. Okay, this is Lafayette, Louisiana, where we had 2 law enforcement officers that were injured, and this one was during a mass shooting that I covered the other day. The shooting occurred at 2:14 a.m. when officers responded to a calls reporting a fight. 3 other people were also injured in the gunfire, including an adult female and 2 children. The suspect was also wounded. The other victims remain in critical condition. Officers were engaged in gunfire by the suspect. The suspect was able to fire gunshots upon and strike 2 uniformed LPD officers. The 3rd Lafayette police officer returned fire. Police detained a suspect who was being treated for injuries at the local hospital. Both officers were shot multiple times, but listed in stable condition. One is in critical condition, the other is in stable condition. Again, they show up, this was a mass shooting, and I covered this one the other day, but, you show up and these guys, they just start shooting at the officers anymore. There's like zero respect for officers these days. So we're going to go on to Amarillo, Texas, where an officer was injured, and our suspect, 36-year-old Lyle Youngs, was unharmed and arrested. The Amarillo Police Department released information on a Friday morning incident in southwest Amarillo in which police said an officer was grazed with his own gun when a man he was trying to arrest got a hold of it. According to the police department, a motor officer stopped a man driving a pickup truck with alleged traffic offense at around 8 a.m. When the officer tried to arrest the driver after finding he had a warrant, the driver allegedly began resisting and fighting with the officer. The driver allegedly ran from the scene and was chased by the officer on foot and continued to resist and fight while the officer tried to arrest him. During the incident, police said another citizen allegedly also stopped and tried to help the officer take the driver into custody. At one point, he was able to get the officer's gun partially out of the holster, and officials say that the gun went off and grazed the officer's leg. The officer was able to regain control of the gun, and the other citizen was able to hold the driver until other officers arrived on the scene. The driver was arrested after he and the officer were checked by paramedics. He was taken to the hospital. The police department said that violent crimes detectives were investigating the incident. So this guy, they're just trying to arrest this guy, and he gets a hold of the gun and grazes the officer's leg with the officer's own gun. And it says the follow-up on this shows, and this guy's This Lyle Youngs, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 charges against him right now. Attempted capital murder of a peace officer, attempting to take a weapon from a peace officer, possession of a controlled substance, resisting arrest, evading arrest, false ID, fugitive from justice, possession of drug paraphernalia, no financial responsibility, and no driver's license. I mean, that guy's facing all that, and you had to have the attempted capital murder charge thrown on top, which is the one that's going to probably get him some jail time. All right, let's go to Orlando, Florida. And this one, we've got 2 officers that were injured. One's a female and one's a male. And our suspect, Daton Shimondrea Viel, he's 28 years old, and he was killed in this ordeal. 2 Orlando police officers are at the hospital in critical condition after being shot Friday night during a traffic stop, another traffic stop. Orlando police told reporters early Saturday morning and a massive manhunt is actively underway to find the suspected shooters. Police Chief Smith said the officers attempted to stop a vehicle that was connected to a homicide investigation out of Miami when the officers were shot. He said the suspects, believed to be 2 people, then carjacked another driver and led law enforcement on pursuit. He said law enforcement was now actively in search of suspects. He did not elaborate on the Miami homicide. He did, however, address the suspects directly. We will find you and you will be brought to justice. Police are expecting to hold a second news conference at 12:30. So not a whole lot about this one other than they ended up getting shot during a traffic stop, which is, when you get pulled over, whether you like the cop or not, you have to keep in mind that in their mind, every confrontation with somebody, anytime they engage with somebody, it could go bad. And you don't know what they're thinking when they're talking to you. All right, let's go to Newland, North Carolina, where we have Officer Aldridge, Sergeant Aldridge, who was injured, and our suspect, 62-year-old Richard Edward Cousins Jr., he was killed. Let's see. On Thursday, August 3rd, approximately 2:59 p.m., they get a call on the Veterans Hotline saying an individual is threatening to take their own life, and they needed a welfare check. The caller identified the individual who needed to be checked as Richard Edwin Cousins Jr. Additional information was obtained during the same period that Cousin had also called Compassionate Hearts with similar statements about taking his own life. Deputies with the Avery County Sheriff's responded. Immediately met with resistance from Cousins, who fired a shot from the residence, and a perimeter was established to secure the area and ensure the surrounding community was a safe distance away from the incident. Responding deputies immediately attempted to de-escalate the situation and were unsuccessful. The incident swiftly evolved into a tactical mission with numerous assisting agencies responding. An 8-hour standoff ensued, which lasted until early morning hours of August 4th. During the multi-hour standoff, one Avery County Sheriff's Office deputy, Sergeant Aldridge, received non-life-threatening injuries from Cousins' gunfire. Cousins died in the early morning hours of August 4th from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. All of the agencies and personnel involved demonstrated great restraint and patience during an intense standoff where Cousins discharged several weapons while law enforcement were on the scene without necessity to return gunfire. All efforts were exhausted to include intense negotiations. So this guy was a veteran, and he made it clear already that he wanted to die. And he tried to get the police to engage with him, and they didn't. It sounds like they were actually trying to really get this situation resolved in a different manner. And the guy, Richard Edward Cousins Jr., ended up taking his own life regardless, and, injuring another officer in the process. So let's go to Stockton, California. This is our last one. Stockton, California, where we have a sergeant, doesn't have his name, that was injured, and our suspect, 20-year-old Sunthawon Benny Savon, that's our suspect, and he was unharmed and arrested. 20-year-old accused of carjacking a 69-year-old man and shooting a Stockton sergeant faces 8 charges in connection to the crime. And that's Sunthawon Benny Savon. We got a picture of this dude. Okay, he's charged with attempted murder of a peace officer, assault on a peace officer with an automatic weapon, assault on a peace officer with a semi-automatic weapon, assault on a peace officer with a firearm, shooting into an inhabited dwelling or occupied vehicle, carjacking, 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. And the charges also carry gun-related and other sentencing enhancements. So he's being charged. He must have had a bunch of guns on him because he's being charged for a bunch of different things. So let's see. The violence began when a 69-year-old man was carjacked and beaten with a firearm. The sergeant was shot while responding to the carjacking, and a neighborhood sheltered in place for hours as police investigated the shooting. Police said they don't believe Savon is the sole suspect, but so far they have not announced more arrests. Savon was denied bail and is due in court on August 10th. Lee Neves, a spokesperson, said Friday that the wounded sergeant is now at home and recovering while surrounded by family and friends. So this guy shoots at the police and he gets a whole list of assault charges, well, an attempted murder charge too. And it sounds like the officer is going to be okay. And that's all we have for you today. 8 officers that were injured by gunfire this past week and 4 officers that were killed in the line of duty. If you like these kinds of videos, hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm and to let me know that these are kind of videos that people want to see more of. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you're not already, consider subscribing. I'll catch you next week, same time, on Thursday afternoons with these in the line of duty videos. Thanks for watching.